how we can use AI in research and medical education and how that can change the care of our patients, which is our main goal. Um, we're gonna start talking about AI in research, and then we'll move on to medical education. I just wanted to separate the two, not because they're not interconnected, but I wanted to be a little bit more specific about the applications that we can have in each of those domains. So AI has been transforming the research landscape, particularly in emergency medicine, by leveraging machine learning, natural language processing, and big data analytics. These technologies have improved our ability to analyze complex data sets, accelerate our discoveries, and enable precision medicine. And we'll talk about precision medicine here in research and precision education in medical education, which is what we want to do. We want to be as individualized as possible. We want to give care to individuals, a very specific care to each one of them. However, its application in research extend beyond the clinical care to include genomic studies, epidemiology, and clinical trials. Today, we'll focus a little bit on these areas while trying to address the ethical and regulatory concerns that come with those. AI plays a significant role in several areas of research, as we already discussed. In genomic and biomarker research, it can help to decode complex genetic patterns, identify disease markers, and personalize treatments. In epidemiology, we know that there are AI-powered models that can help us track disease outbreaks and assess risk factors in patients. We can all, of course, think about the COVID pandemic. Additionally, AI can change the landscape of clinical trial design. We know how difficult it is to design and enroll patients in clinical trials, especially when there are multiple sites involved, and that topic is extremely important. And AI can help optimize patient selection and predict treatment responses, reducing the costs that are associated with those clinical trials, and of course, improving our efficiency. What are some ethical considerations? And we'll talk in detail about those, because ethics must be at the forefront of AI-driven research. Protecting data privacy and confidentiality is critical. Requiring our compliance with HIPAA, which is the law here in the United States that protects patient data and how we can use the data and how we can share the data. But of course, there are other regulatory bodies that are specific in each country and the laws that we need to follow in each of country, which, by the way, are very, very different. The legal landscape about AI is very different in Europe than what it is in the United States. And I'm sure in India might be different as well. So we need to make sure that we follow the local regulations. Another challenge that we have is algorithmic bias. Many AI models are trained on specific data sets, potentially overlooking key population-specific variables. For example, if you're studying a population or if you're studying actually a condition that causes chronic kidney failure and your data does not include a lot of patients that have chronic kidney failure, your training set, then of course your output is not going to be accurate. And this is what we call garbage in, garbage out in the AI world. Additionally, informed consent in AI research is complex, especially when it involves vulnerable populations such as pregnant women and children. As in certain age groups, both parental consent and child assent are necessary for transparency and, of course, ethical oversight. Effective data governance ensures that AI-driven research is both secure and ethical. Secure data handling measures such as encryption, which is very important, and de-identification, protect patient privacy. And these are two areas that require a lot of attention to make sure that the data is truly protected. However, data sharing presents a challenge. While we want to have open collaboration with other institutions, other countries, because we want research quality, higher research quality, and that is one way to do it. We need to balance that with very strict privacy protections because it's very easy. And we've had a lot of cases here in the US, but internationally, with bad actors trying to break into those systems and use that data, sell the data to the dark web, or potentially ask for ransom to release the data back to the institutions. Additionally, we need to have standardized AI-driven data collection protocols to maintain data integrity and comparability across institutions. If I'm collecting the data in one way and your institution collects data in a very different way, we're not able to merge that data and make any discoveries or any analysis. So we need to make sure we design and we use specific protocols to exchange our data. So although AI has the potential to revolutionize research and make significant discoveries, make our lives easier, there's a significant gap in its accessibility, particularly in low resource settings. Many developing regions lack the infrastructure for AI-driven research. And as you know, AI and computing, it consumes a lot of power, which is not very easy to have everywhere in the world. For example, I know that some systems required energy that is enough to power cities like New York City. So we understand the need for such computing power and energy is huge and can be a limiting factor for developing regions, which might lack the infrastructure, but that limits their ability to contribute to the benefit and benefit from those advancements. So bridging that gap requires global collaboration, investment in AI infrastructure, and policies that ensure equitable AI adoption. That is extremely important because we want to make sure that AI-driven research is truly inclusive and beneficial for all patients. Transparency is also essential for building trust in AI-driven research. One major concern is the explainability of AI-generated results. If researchers and clinicians, if we don't understand how AI arrives at those conclusions, the findings may be difficult to validate. We need to be able to understand what the output is, and so we can explain that to our patients. Additionally, educating stakeholders, including other researchers, healthcare professionals, patients, and families on those AI applications can help build trust that we need. Definitely need that trust because I can tell you, gauging from the responses that we've gotten in with the use of AI applications, there is a lot of mistrust, and in a lot of cases, rightfully so. Because public perception plays this vital role, it is important and it's our duty to engage communities and policymakers in the discussions on AI ethics if we really want to move forward with the use of AI in research and education, and of course in clinical care. AI in research is governed by multiple regulatory frameworks, and we said that there might be differences between the countries in terms of how they regulate and how they create laws to govern the use of AI. Here in the US, for example, the FDA, or Food and Drug Administration, has some regulatory power over that. Of course, there are World Health Organization guidelines as well. But one of the biggest challenges in validating AI models is, to make sure that they are reliable, transparent, and reproducible. And current regulations are not always adaptable to the rapid evolution of AI technology, which means that policies must evolve to keep up with the advancements while ensuring the safety and efficacy in research. I can guarantee you that what AI looks like today, it was extremely different. It is extremely different from 5 years ago. Things are changing very, very rapidly. And of course, as we know, lawmakers and regulatory bodies are slow to adopt, which is very important because if we don't have those safeguards in place before we can use those tools, then again we can that can lead to mistrust and also using AI not in an efficient way, not in an ethical way. And as we briefly discussed, bias remains a major concern in AI-driven research. Many data sets used to train AI models lack the diversity, which can lead to infrastructure, to inaccurate or inequitable outcomes, especially for underrepresented populations or diseases. Um, Additionally, we're very, very concerned about the socioeconomic and demographic disparities that can further complicate this issue, making it crucial to design models that account for diverse populations. We need to make sure that the data that we're using are representative of the populations we're targeting. So strategies such as diverse dataset inclusion and bias monitoring, we need to make sure that we monitor, there's human oversight at any point, and that we monitor the output to ensure that what we're getting is our goal and that it represents the population we're trying to target. If we want to mitigate those risks and ensure that those systems are fair and can be used in an equitable way. So the future of AI and research is promising. It will enhance predictive modeling and precision medicine, allowing for earlier disease detection and personalized interventions. Advances in federated medicine and federated computing, as we discussed, will allow multiple institutions to collaborate while maintaining their data privacy. And there are ways to do that, to collaborate and share data while maintaining the integrity of the data and the privacy. But that's what we need to further accelerate large-scale research studies. However, for AI to reach its full potential ethically, as we discussed, we need dedicated AI ethics boards and oversight committees to guide its development responsibly. So understanding those risks, understanding those ethical considerations, that means we need to develop those committees, those AI ethical boards to be able to monitor and regulate AI in order to be able to be transparent, fair, and equitable. To summarize for our the use of AI in research, AI presents incredible opportunities for research, but ethical considerations, data governance, and regulatory compliance must remain a priority. Ensuring fairness, transparency, and security in AI-driven research requires a collaborative, multidisciplinary approach. Moving forward, researchers, policymakers, and institutions must work together to establish ethical AI research methodologies that prioritize the well-being of all populations. Let's now discuss a specific clinical problem, which is the focus of my research career, and that is sepsis, and specifically pediatric sepsis, although with the exception of neonates and younger children, the pathophysiology might not be that different from young adults. So by giving you an example of how AI can be used, we can discuss about all the implications that it has in research. So a little bit about sepsis, and I'm sure you already know very well. It remains a critical challenge in pediatric care, affecting 75,000 children annually in the U.S. and accounts for close to 5% of pediatric hospital admissions, with mortality rates going all the way up to 20%. By the way, you might have seen that study, but back in 2020, Lancet published a study, an epidemiological study that identified that sepsis is responsible for 20% of deaths worldwide, which is a pretty high number. So early diagnosis is crucial, but traditional methods often fail to detect sepsis in its early stages. We've tried a lot of different things from education to to other interventions. And as we know, sepsis criteria are developed by consensus. They have changed multiple different times, in the past few years. And also there is heterogeneity in sepsis presentation and symptomatology that contributes to inconsistent outcomes. And, in severe cases, the mortality can go even higher than what we just discussed, up to 50% in some cases, which is really high. And each hour of delayed antibiotic administration increases mortality by 7%, underscoring the need for early recognition and intervention. So AI is already changing medical diagnostics with EHR-based AI improving early sepsis detection. Machine learning techniques such as random forest models have demonstrated an area under the curve of 0.85 for sepsis detection, which is significantly outperforming traditional methods. What I'm trying to say here is with those applications, we're already able to detect sepsis and diagnose it way earlier than using conventional methods. And AI-assisted decision-making is already showing promise, reducing ICU mortality by up to 60% through early intervention alerts. Predictive analytics leverages historical data to anticipate clinical deterioration with an accuracy of 80%. Logistic regression, neural networks, and random forests have demonstrated increasing accuracy levels, reaching 88% for the latter, random forests. And AI models surpass traditional scoring systems like QSOFA that you might already be familiar with, that we use in the ED and the ICU for sepsis diagnosis, but also to assess severity. But the use of predictive analytics and AI has improved early warning capabilities by at least 20%. But sepsis, of course, is not a uniform disease. And our research specifically using those models identified 4 distinct subtypes in pediatric cohorts, each with unique immune responses and clinical trajectories. We analyzed over 850 pediatric severe sepsis septic shock cases using multi-institutional electronic health record data and unsupervised machine learning techniques such as latent class analysis. Our findings revealed that certain subtypes exhibited mortality rates 20 times as high as others, with distinct inflammatory markers and differential need for invasive ventilation, intubation, and vasopressors. These types of analysis can allow us to predict the need for certain targeted treatments and intervene sooner for better clinical outcomes. For example, what you need to do with those models is when someone comes to the emergency department with symptomatology that is related to sepsis, the diagnosis is made, those systems can actually predict the need for specific interventions. If someone will require vasopressors or intubation, for example, that can help us intervene sooner for better outcomes. In a lot of cases, thinking about emergency department crowding and wait times, those systems can predict who will need admission to the ICU specifically. So you can try to facilitate that sooner and of course get your bed empty for the next patient that will need to be seen in the ED. So a lot of different things that can be done here for better outcomes for the specific patient that we're treating, but also for the rest of the patients in the ED. Those 4 pediatric sepsis phenotypes that we just discussed, and we identified, highlight distinct clinical patterns with varying outcomes. So phenotype A represents a low-risk group with minimal organ dysfunction and excellent prognosis. This is a good thing if the patient falls into that category, that phenotype. that would only require standard of care. Phenotype B is characterized by significant cardiovascular and respiratory compromise requiring intensive support and is associated with moderate mortality. Phenotype C reflects a multi-organ failure and carries the highest mortality risk, potentially benefiting from targeted immunomodulatory treatments. So there have been some treatments in sepsis with immunomodulation other than your classic antibiotics and fluids. But of course, we have to be careful because sepsis is an imbalance of hyperimmune response and immune paralysis. So if we give immunomodulatory treatment or immunosuppressive treatment to someone who is at the phase of immune paralysis will, of course, do more damage than help, meaning those systems can help us identify the patients that our specific treatments could be more beneficial. And phenotype D includes more severe patients compared to phenotype A with a relatively higher mortality and need for respiratory support, but with a lower percentage require intensive care. So these phenotypes offer valuable insight for tailoring management strategies and improving risk stratification in pediatric sepsis. So how do we use those models that we have developed? We are trying to integrate them into real-time hospital workflows, into the electronic health records, reducing the time to antibiotic administration by 30%. A recent case study demonstrated that early intervention based on AI predictions decreased the need for mechanical ventilation by 25%. However, implementation challenges persist, including data inconsistencies, initial clinician skepticism, and alert fatigue due to false positive rates of 10 to 15% in the best case scenario. So what happens is, of course, we want to have very high sensitivity of those tools, right? We don't want to miss any on any cases. But at the same time, if our specificity is not very high, what ends up happening is we get all those alerts. This patient will have sepsis or has sepsis, and the clinicians, of course, we grow tired of those alerts, and then we end up ignoring them. And of course, in many cases, they're real, and we ignore them, and that can have detrimental issues for impact for the patient. So balancing that sensitivity and specificity with AI models has been a real challenge. The future of AI in sepsis care includes federated learning, which is a machine learning technique that lets multiple devices train an AI model together, but without sharing data with a central server. Remember, we talked about data integrity. That is one way to protect the data. That technique leverages multimodal data such as genomics, imaging, and wearable sensors to enhance predictive accuracy. AI-driven personalized treatment pathways will allow us to tailor interventions like fluid resuscitation and vasopressor therapy based on the sepsis subtype that we just discussed. Additionally, AI models are showing promise in predicting treatment efficacy with up to 90% accuracy in identifying responders to novel therapy. So we can use AI to guide us in the therapy, predict who will respond to our therapy and who will not. Going back to our ethical and practical considerations, to ensure fairness in AI-driven predictions, we must address biases that are inherent in training data. There are models that are trained on over 500,000 global cases to improve representation across demographics. So as you can tell, we definitely need global collaboration if we really want to make a difference at a global level and cover all populations. Additionally, model transparency remains a priority that we need to make sure that all the techniques we're using, the neural networks we're using, we're able to improve interpretability, that we are able to understand how the system works. It's not a black box that we don't understand what it spits out and how we can use all the information that we get. Despite all those advances, only 5 AI-based sepsis prediction tools have received FDA approval. I have to tell you, it's not an easy approval to get. You need to prove that it's working. You need to have a clinical trial. But at the same time, having only 5, it shows that we do have the need for regulatory oversight. So it is an important thing to remember. It's not a redundancy. It is extremely important that we have oversight. To summarize, AI is reshaping pediatric sepsis management by improving early detection, refining sepsis subtyping for precision medicine, and reducing ICU stays through targeted interventions. However, continued research and clinical validation are essential. We must collaborate across disciplines, clinicians, data scientists, and policymakers to responsibly implement AI in pediatric sepsis care, but in adult sepsis care as well. So the goal is to have further discussions and multi-center trials with data sets that exceed 100,000 patients and even 500,000 patients, as we saw some of those data sets that are out there globally. Switching gears now to medical education, and I'm sure you'll be interested in that. You do bedside teaching, you teach medical students, there's residency program teaching and fellowship program teaching, so forth. So it is important to understand how we can use AI in medical education. Because AI tools like, and use of machine learning, natural language processing, and big data analytics can enhance how we teach and assess learners. So it's not only good for teaching, but also the assessment of the learners. And these systems can process massive data sets, detect trends in learner performance, and even adopt instruction in real time. That's the beauty of those systems. And we can get what we just discussed about precision medicine. Again, we can get precision education that's tailored toward specific trainee. So why is AI becoming such a focal point now? A few reasons. First, the volume of educational and clinical data has exploded, as you can see, as you have seen already in the past few years. The data sets out there are amazing, and the number has skyrocketed. Second, the AI technologies have matured, right? It's not the same. ChatGPT has evolved. It's not the same as it used to be. Now it can think way better, and you get better outputs from there. And finally, the pandemic, whether we liked it or not, accelerated digital learning adoption. You can all remember that medical students were not allowed to go into the hospitals, in the clinic, and that it was a significant barrier for their training. So we had to be creative there, and innovate, which of course had some downsides, but additionally had some benefits. So we now have both the need and the tools to personalize and scale education like never before, and we should take advantage of that. And again, AI is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. So we either embrace it and we monitor it and we regulate it, or we are left behind. AI supports several key functions in education. Machine learning can analyze learner behavior, offering predictive feedback and flagging those that are at risk of falling behind. Natural language processing enables more intuitive interfaces like chatbots, speech recognition, or even grading open-ended responses. And generative AI, that I'm sure you're all familiar with, like large language models, ChatGPT, and so forth, can automatically create teaching materials, such as multiple choice questions or clinical scenarios. These technologies together allow for a dynamic, adaptive learning ecosystem. The evidence base for AI in medical education is growing rapidly. Most research focuses on undergraduate medical education, simulation, assessment, and feedback tools, especially those using machine learning and NLP. As you can see here, undergraduate medical education is really the use of AI there is really exploding, and I can attest to that, having a role in UME. But GME is following, and it's going to get there. There is a concentration of studies from North America and Europe, and most tools are still in pilot or early implementation phases. No surprise here, specific specialties have used AI and have published on AI use in medical education more than others, and those are either procedure heavy specialties like surgery, radiology is another one. Emergency medicine is getting there. I don't want to tell you about pediatrics. It's abysmal where it is right now, but EM is getting there, but still lagging behind other specialties in terms of AI-related publications. So I think some specialties are leading the way, but that creates an opportunity for other specialties to follow through and start working on some of those projects. Let's look at how AI is already being used in medical education. There are several active applications: adaptive learning platforms that personalize content based on learner progress, automated assessments that offer instant feedback. You can get feedback in the clinic while you're writing your note in the electronic health record. And even you can get intelligent tutoring systems. Chatbots and virtual patients simulate clinical conversations. And by the way, there was a recent study that showed that when they used an AI virtual patient that and or a virtual physician in that case, that the AI based physician showed more empathy than the actual physician when they recorded them. So again, that's one study, but that shows you that there is a lot of room for improvement. Again, using those chatbots and virtual patients can simulate clinical conversations, and AI-driven analytics can help educators identify at-risk learners early. You want to be able, like we identify conditions early and we want to treat them. It's the same way with learners. We want to identify issues early on that so we can intervene. And that's not theoretical. Many of these tools are in active pilot testing or integration today. And I'll give you an example. There are ways to actually monitor, and there's a pilot. I forget where it's, and I forget the school, but there's a pilot now looking at the hours that residents are working, and that can identify discrepancies or in their schedule. For example, I mean, and as you know, scheduling residents or even faculty is not perfect, and it doesn't it's extremely difficult to do. So AI can identify patterns. For example, if one resident has been scheduled for more hours, or there is an imbalance in the way that residents are scheduled, AI can identify that, so you can intervene early before there are concerns about burnout, for example. And it can make the process a little bit more equitable and fair. Because humans, it's not that someone is doing it on purpose, but it is, having done schedules myself, I can tell you it's definitely not an easy process, and there's room for errors there. Emergency medicine specifically presents challenges for educators. There are some challenges that are specific to EM and other procedurally heavy specialties. It's a hands-on specialty, right? Requiring competency in communication, procedural skills, and acute decision making. And all that in a high-stress environment, and maybe in the resuscitation room, which we all know it can be a high-stress situation. Learners have variable access to cases, making it hard to ensure that there's consistent exposure to all cases. It might be rare cases that they might not see frequently. So that means they don't get that needed exposure to be able to learn how to manage them. There's also limited time for individualized instruction, especially during busy clinical shifts. And when you're as a faculty member, when you're very busy in your shift, you might not have the time to spend teaching. And we do a lot of teaching on the fly in the ER, as you all know, but it might not you know, be possible to spend enough time for teaching, and there is an opportunity here for those tools, and these realities create significant gaps in experiential learning and timely feedback. Assessment, additionally, in clinical environments is often subjective and inconsistent. Direct observation can be limited when we're very, very busy, and feedback may be delayed or vague. We've seen those evaluations. This was a great resident. I observed a resuscitation or a procedure, and they did very well without actually giving any real feedback. And a lot of times we either forget about it or we complete those evaluations 3 or 4 days or a week later, that it might be either too late, and we forget all the details about that. So there's an opportunity there, and especially in high acuity settings, preceptors may not have the capacity to provide detailed feedback in that moment. Additionally, students may rotate through different faculty members, further reducing feedback continuity. So this is where AI can step in to supplement and standardize assessment processes and bridge those gaps. For example, machine learning algorithms can analyze learner behavior over time, providing consistent, data-driven insights on performance. Natural language processing can transcribe and evaluate communication skills in real-time simulations. Video analytics can assess procedural techniques. It can give you actually real-time feedback. At the University of Pittsburgh, they have already created an AI simulation program that does not have any human involved there. The computer gives real-time feedback to the trainees about their resuscitation skills and the procedural skills by analyzing their video and voice, of course, and it is pretty amazing what it can do. The feedback that those tools can deliver is immediate, informative, enhancing the feedback loop without overburdening faculty. Just to make sure that we're on the same page, we don't want to replace human educators, but to empower them with more precise tools and help them be more efficient. They can use that time that they save from, providing all this feedback to something else, teach something different, use that for patient care or for personal, use it as personal time. We talk about physician burnout all the time. So there's an opportunity here to free up some time for our educators and our faculty. Simulation is a cornerstone of clinical education, especially in high stakes fields like emergency medicine. AI enhances simulation by adapting scenarios in real time based on learner performance. For example, if a resident correctly manages initial trauma evaluation, the system may escalate to a more complex complication like a liver lac and ask and change that scenario to challenge them a little bit more. AI can also enable deeper performance analytics, tracking timing, communication, and even emotional tone through speech recognition or facial expression analysis. These simulations can be debriefed automatically, offering consistent feedback without requiring faculty presence for every session. Yes, there should be human oversight. Of course, we need to make sure that the computer does what it's supposed to do, and that that there are no issues there, that there are no inaccuracies or problems. But it is an opportunity to get real-time formative feedback, in-depth feedback that can help our trainees. Ultrasound training is another important area for AI development. Traditionally, learners gain proficiency through hands-on experience and mentorship, which can be variable. AI can assist in real-time image interpretation, guiding trainees during scanning. It can highlight anatomical landmarks, flag poor probe positioning. It can actually give you an alert. Your probe is not positioned correctly, or identify when an image meets the diagnostic criteria. Over time, and with a lot of training data, the system learns from each user's scanning habits, allowing for customized feedback and targeted remediation. That improves both the diagnostic accuracy and learner confidence. It's great to have real-time feedback when you perform an ultrasound. I have not tried that system, but I have seen it in practice, and it's very, very impressive. Generative AI tools, ChatGPT, Claude, and other large language models can create new clinical cases in seconds, including patient histories, exam findings, labs, imaging, and so forth. So this opens the door for rapid development of diverse, customizable teaching materials. For example, if you need a case involving asthma exacerbation for a morning teaching session, you can generate it on demand. These tools also support question generation for quizzes or assessments, helping educators focus more on facilitation and feedback and less on content creation. Beyond essays, AI can generate clinical vignettes and assessment questions quickly and in volume. You can see here in the picture using ChatGPT how easily you can create a case. And those can be tailored to learner level and learning objectives, but again, they require quality control. And also, it is important to learn, and that is a take-home message. It's important to learn how to write the prompts. Because if you write very general prompts, you're not going to get very good results. You need to, and there are, actually, if you search, there are ways and ready-made prompts that you can use and tailor to your own needs to help getting the best results, like identifying the learner level, the difficulty level that you want as well, the type of scenario and so forth. So the better prompts you give, the better the outcome will be and the better question or clinical case that you will get. Of course, a lot of those tools hallucinate, and ChatGPT is very well known for hallucinating and creating citations that don't exist. And that's how a lot of trainees are caught using ChatGPT or other tools by having papers and citations there that are made up and they don't exist. So you have to be extra careful when you use those tools. Open Evidence is another tool that it is a little bit more accurate than ChatGPT when it comes to literature, but remember, even Open Evidence uses abstracts and papers that are freely available in the literature. But many of those articles are actually there's a paywall and you don't have free access, and that means that Open Evidence has access to just the abstract. Additionally, there are some journals, and I forget which ones, I think it's JAMA or Nature, I forget which ones have an agreement with Open Evidence. So the system is skewed towards specific journals, and you might miss a lot of articles in the literature that, not because they're not good or they're not of high quality, but just because there are specific agreements. So you have to be extra careful with that. As we integrate AI into education, we must, of course, in the same way we did for research, pause and consider the ethical implications. One major issue is data consent. Have learners and patients agreed for their interactions to be used in training algorithms? That's something to consider. Transparency is another concern. How do we ensure that AI-generated feedback or decisions can be explained and trusted? Finally, while AI can simulate guidance, it shouldn't be mistaken for clinical advice. Educators must be clear about the boundaries of these tools to maintain learner safety and patient care integrity, because a lot of times also, if we get an output from an AI tool in our clinical care and it's wrong, but are we open to question that AI output or that AI recommendation? There would be a lot of clinicians out there that would be skeptical to challenge AI thinking. Okay, it's a computer, it has a lot of data, so it must be accurate and must be true. So we have to be extra careful, because at the end of the day, we are responsible for the care we provide to our patients and not the computer. Initial feedback from both learners and faculty has been promising. Many trainees appreciate the real-time specific feedback and the ability to engage in simulation without scheduling constraints. Faculty report that AI systems help them identify struggling learners earlier and offload routine teaching tasks. That said, concerns remain, especially around accuracy, over-reliance on automation, and the learning curve for integrating these tools into existing curriculum. And continuous user feedback is essential to guide the refinement of those tools and build trust with the community of educators and trainees that we're using these tools for. Implementing AI requires clear goals, faculty development, technical support, and a willingness to adopt. Pilot programs, interdisciplinary collaboration, and learner input are all critical to success. And we need to focus on the faculty. Younger generations and trainees are, easier to use those computers. And AI, whereas faculty, we don't adopt that fast. Some people, were born, including myself, before the internet era. So we need to make sure that we can adapt to those new technologies, that there's AI literacy among faculty as well, if we want for these technologies to be adopted and adopted responsibly, and also train the trainers that will then help our trainees use those tools effectively. To wrap up, AI doesn't replace educators. It augments our ability to teach, assess, and mentor, but at scale. It provides tools that support more personalized, efficient, and equitable education. In medical education, we have the opportunity to lead in adopting these innovations, particularly in areas like simulation, feedback, and decision-making training. By understanding both of the benefits and limitations, we can ensure that AI enhances and not disrupts the human core of medical education. And these are my references. Thank you so much for listening to me, and I welcome any questions and discussions on these findings.
Does anybody have any questions? A question I kind of have for the residents is, how are you guys currently using AI, if at all? Do your faculty use it? Does your institutions have any specific policies that either encourage or discourage it?
Yeah,
I feel
that's
like
a great question.
anybody, it'd be really good to get some insight if someone's able to come off mute and let us know. No one.
Jerry, I
Okay.
can tell you how we're using AI in our residencies here. You might know that one, it's used in residency selection, with the Thalamus platform that is being used with ERAS, and now there is an AI function there that can help for mission aligned selection, meaning that each program can select which variables they want to look for, and the system can summarize and can give them a score whether these applicants meet those requirements, and that are, of course, weighted very differently from institution to institution. You know, some institutions want research experience, some other institutions want scores, higher scores, and so forth. So it has been used extensively in residency selection so far.
Do you have general advice on, as most of these individuals are probably learners, do you have general advice on, I guess, if they were to explore one or two tools or one or two applications, what would you think would be most high yield for them to kind of look into?
Yeah, so there are actually I'm going to be very specific. For presentations, there are different applications you can use, like Gamma, that can create a presentation for you. I've used it, it works really well. Claude is another tool that I really like. Why? Because unlike ChatGPT that creates things from scratch and does all the work for you, it puts your thoughts together. So you do the work. You know, have to create the ideas. You have to come up with those ideas. But what the system does, it puts those ideas together, and helps you organize them, which I prefer over something like ChatGPT that you're like, create this from scratch, and you might not even have any input or do any work there, because that's not the way to learn. Because it's like being an attending, you need to have gone through the training. You can't supervise a resident taking care of an asthmatic patient if you haven't treated asthma yourself ever. So the same way goes for using those tools. The goal is to maintain the integrity of our training. So if you use ChatGPT and all those tools for everything, then you're not going to learn. That it's that simple, and you're not going to be able to make it, to personalize it, identify the errors. Like ChatGPT makes a lot of mistakes. So if you're not well trained, you're not going to be able to identify those. So Claude is one that I frequently use. Open Evidence is good for to summarize the literature, or focus on any topic you want, that you want to do some literature search. So it can be really helpful. But again, remember the limitations we discussed.
And then as far as some of those applications that you had mentioned, particularly from a medical education standpoint, did any of your references like have the specific example of some like the AI that is behind that application? So in thinking about how we can potentially, even in this program, try to incorporate some of those things.
So the most tools are in simulation and ultrasound. So, and there are pilot studies out there now. To be very honest, those tools usually come from vendors, so they're not for free. And they have developed, like, again, real-time feedback for ultrasound diagnostics. So I was recently talking to one of the companies that has developed an AI tool that can diagnose pneumothorax or hemothorax or even pneumonias without the need of chest x-rays, but without also the need for someone that really knows how to interpret ultrasound. The system itself can identify all the anatomical structures and make the diagnosis itself based on the criteria we've entered. So it is exploding out there, but again, those tools are not for free, and they're still in a pilot phase. Simulation is another huge area that you'll see exploding with chatbots and real-time feedback from AI tools, and not from a human, or when you use standardized patients sometimes. So you'll have AI doing all that work. They are in development right now. Again, most of those tools um, are developed by vendors. Academia has not done a lot of work, or as much work as we should be doing. So I think in the next couple of years, we'll see that exploding as well.
Yeah, I was just curious since we do a lot of teaching and evaluation from a virtual standpoint, often through Zoom. I was just curious about those potential companies, and this certainly provides the opportunity to try those things out in an academic setting. So I was just curious.
Yeah.
Um, Does anybody else have any questions? I find it hard to believe that none of you guys are using AI and don't have any insight to gather from someone who's very experienced, particularly at the intersection of both clinical and education spaces. So I would encourage you guys to speak up, or at least type in the chat if you have any questions. But if not, then we'll wrap it up. Yep, doesn't look like it. So again, thank you so much. I found that talk to be very insightful. So thank you so much for your time. And hopefully, even if no one's saying anything, you gain something from this and how you can kind of incorporate this or how you can advocate for this in your own education, and how you can apply it to your future careers as educators.
Thank you very much, Jerry, for the invitation, and it was a pleasure being here.
Likewise. All right. Goodbye, everybody. Good
Thank
night.
you.
Bye.